have had a very long night. I think I slept collectively 3 hours, if I'm being generous. I needed to redo my hair before sitting down today. I needed to do a lot of things, actually. And I have not been able to have access to my hands for the last little bit. I was lucky to even set this up and make a coffee, but that's okay. It's just one of those days. And I'm leaning in. I'm really, really leaning in and just embracing it and showing up exactly as I am today. So, hi. I made myself a decaf vanilla latte in my little gnome mug. Oh my gosh, that tastes, my stomach just growled. That tastes like sweet nectar. This is going to be a fun spring coffee talk. So yesterday I was vlogging a mental spring cleaning vlog. So over the span of the weekend, actually, I was vlogging just my meditations and my brain dump and just planning out my spring season. And then there was such a process to it that I didn't want to bog up the whole vlog with me talking. So I figured I would take the process and drop it into this coffee talk on how exactly I actually planned for the spring season and my process of doing so. I expected to have free hands, but I don't. So I'm going to do my best to explain it. I want to pull some cards for spring, as well as do our usual healing mantra card of the week and start my grimoire for spring as well. So this is going to be a really fun talk. I hope you have a delicious spring essenced coffee drink of some kind. This is the process that I use to organize my, first and foremost, just my brain. Like I said, the vlog itself, which is going to be a public vlog, so it should be out in about, it's going out all within the same week of this talk. So if you're listening to the talk and that vlog isn't out yet, it is coming. It's spring cleaning my mind because my brain has felt so scattered, so cluttered, and I just have been feeling so much mental weight. When it came to coming into the spring season, I wasn't feeling too anchored and I wasn't feeling too centered. And I knew I really needed to just anchor my brain, take some time to create some space between me and my thoughts, and then also put my thoughts down on paper and then organize all of the things that were weighing on my brain in a way that made me feel like I had some kind of strategy or plan going into this new season. So that is exactly what I'm going to share today, how I organized those thoughts, those ideas, my projects for spring, and how you can too. So I'm going to share how I did it, but I'll share it in a way that you can obviously take it and utilize it for whatever your ideas are, whatever your goals are, whatever your projects are for the spring. Spring always feels like such an inspiring time to just refresh everything, like truly get that sense of freshness in life, especially after coming out of a dark winter. Winter itself is more of a time for rest, and I love that for what it is. We love her for what she is, but I am ready to wake up. I'm ready to lock in. When life gets so busy, as much as I would love to spend an entire day refreshing my routine, my home, between juggling work, juggling my family right now, just juggling everything, like the mental clutter, it can build up really fast. So this is the first, I don't know, I won't claim it as the first year I've done it this way. It's just that I don't remember doing it this way in the past, where I have taken my brain and planned it or structured it first, taken my thoughts, my goals, my ideas, even the things that are stressing on me and bothering me, and structuring them in a way that feels more organized, plans things, makes me feel more competent, better, refreshed, like I said. If you've also been feeling a little mentally bogged down or a little stressed that spring's coming in hot and quick, or in general, if you just want that inspiration, that dose of inspiration, but you don't know where to start, then grab a coffee, grab your whatever planning structure you like to use, paper journals, bullet journals, digital planners, calendars, whatever it is, whatever you like to use. And let's do it. Let's dive in. So step one is organizing or dumping the mental clutter. So I don't know about you, but lately my brain feels like it has 12 tabs open at once, or it feels like my photo bank on my phone, which is just completely chaotic and unorganized. Unfinished thoughts, random ideas, concepts or things that I really want to dial into, but just haven't really had the time to like intentionally draw my attention there. Ideas I want to start, things I feel behind on, things I know I have to get a start on really soon. And all of that at once was just making me feel super overwhelmed. The problem is when I don't have a system in place, everything feels like a priority. And then I get stuck in freeze state where I'm like, what do I do first? What's the highest priority? Because everything feels like it feeds into one another. Like to do one thing will affect another thing and that will affect something else. And it just feels like this perpetual loop that swirls around me. And then I just don't know where to start. And I do a lot of routine stuff. And in my past, I've filmed many routine videos, and it's because I'm always tweaking my routine. I'm always tweaking my system. I actually recently posted on Threads about this, about how like my toxic trait is that I get so good at making systems that work for me. And then I realize that there's a couple things missing from the system. So I tweak it again, and then I tweak it again, and then I tweak it again, and I add more things in until all of a sudden the system almost feels more complicated than it needs to be. And I wipe the system clean, go back into a go with the flow state for a few days, and then I start all over again. Then I make a whole new system. And at first I was like, that kind of feels like a toxic trait. That feels like I just keep starting over in a way. But someone actually wrote back to me and was like, actually, that's just part of your human design. I don't know if you guys are into human design or if you've done it before. I am a manifestor generator, and apparently manifestor generators need to constantly rework their system. It's almost like a feedback loop. You need to create a plan, integrate the plan, try the plan, get results from the plan, build into a couple days, build in some consistency so you can see the feedback from that plan, take the feedback and analyze it, see what's working, see what isn't, and then tweak it and repeat the system again. And so I was like, wow, that makes me feel way better about this quirk of my brain. However, recently, the stress it just completely put me into a flop. Like I fully flopped and I felt like I was the Energizer Bunny just dashing around trying to do like 10 things at once with no clear system in sight. So it wasn't really a go with the flow. It was more so a go with the stress, and it was not working for me. So just like spring cleaning our homes, I personally felt like I needed to spring clean my mind, and that if I did that first, that would center me enough that everything else would fall into line and fall into place. Just dump everything that's in your brain. You could set a timer. I feel like having a timer made me feel like I didn't have to perfect or remember everything that's been bugging me lately. It was just like, okay, in the next 5 minutes, what is popping into my mind is something that is a high alert, something I need to pay attention to, something I need to get done soon, something I want to start soon, something I want to plant into the spring season, especially coming out of winter, because I told myself anything that I didn't start by spring wasn't going to be planted into this year. I would have to put it off until next year. Things like starting a blanket or working on my book or, my garden, spring cleaning, like any of my goals that I came into the winter feeling inspired by, if I hadn't at least taken some kind of active step, even if the active step was just planning, then it was a sign to me that I'm doing too much, and I have to just, if it's not going to naturally integrate its way into the season, then it's going to have to be put off until next year. So because of that, there are a lot of things that I feel very passionate about that I really want to do. And so I just dumped it all onto the piece of paper and let it be what it was. Let it be as messy and chaotic as it needed to be. Work projects, home tasks, places that really need a good deep clean, declutter, or reorganizing within the home. Projects in our house that are still incomplete. Gardening. I really need to plan out my garden because that season's coming right around the corner very quickly. Tax season's coming around the corner, and that always stresses the bejeebers out of me. What was that word? I don't know. That I just feel like that was so. It doesn't need to be ordered. It doesn't need to be categorized yet. It doesn't even really need to make sense. Like just write it out as exactly how it's hitting your brain, because you're going to make sense of it afterwards. So there were some of the things that I wrote in my journal that were maybe a little bit too detailed and some things that were a bit too vague, but the second step is going to make more sense out of that. This step alone made me feel so much lighter, like immediately. And it's because I haven't done a good brain dump in a while. Like my journaling process lately has been a bit more feeling out my feelings and not so much taking all of the passing thoughts, the passing clouds in my brain, and planting them down onto paper so I can actually start to organize them, which leads us into part 2. And this is the part that gets really fun if you are someone that gets like a sweet satisfaction out of organizing things. I am one of those people. So off to the side, label the different areas of your life, the core areas of your life. So for me, that looked like work/content or content creation, family and relationships, finances, home and home projects, personal goals and health. And I believe that was it. Those 5 categories were what I stuck it with. And in those 5 categories, you could do this a couple different ways. I did it with highlighters. So after I wrote out my categories, I highlighted each category with a specific highlighter so that I knew that color pertained to that category. You could also do this with numbers if you don't have highlighters, just 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So then you go over to your brain dump and you take a look at whatever it is that you wrote down and you figure out what category that thing fits into. So again, it wouldn't matter if what I brain dumped was too vague or too detailed. Either way, it's going to fit into a certain category. Back over to your brain dump and find a way to either circle or label or highlight things so that everything suddenly fits into a category. It's starting to organize the dump on the page. And then optional step, but I chose to do this one just again to get that sense of anxiety off my shoulders, was to use exclamation marks, 3 being high priority, 2 being medium priority, 1 being lower priority, no exclamation mark being no priority. And the best way that there's like a graph, and I'm not going to remember who made it, what it's called, but it's going to just come off the top of my head. And if I can source it, I will put it on the screen. But it's this idea of when you are trying to prioritize things, which I am terrible at, you create a table, if you will, and you don't actually have to do this on the piece of paper, though you definitely can, but you create a table, you create a cross so that there are 4 squares in your table. And the first one is pending deadline, meaning that the deadline is soon, and also high priority, needs to get done, is going to have a great effect on your life. Those are the things that you put 3 exclamation marks by. So for me, that was like, okay, making sure that I update my accountant with all of the paperwork she needs so that we can start to file my taxes for the year. Making sure that I plan out what I need to get for my garden, because that's coming right around the corner and it is a higher priority. Medium priority is things that are going to have a great effect on your life, but don't necessarily have a pending deadline. So for that, I would put things like my book. Content would go into higher priority for me, but my book is something that doesn't actually have a pending deadline. So it's something that is going to have a great effect on my life. I really am excited about it. I really want to do it. Would love to have an earlier deadline, but it's not something that I actually have to hit by a certain time. So I put it as a medium priority. The 1 exclamation mark is it has a deadline, but it's not super important for your life. These would be things like spring cleaning. Okay, so in my mind, I want my spring cleaning to be done within the next 8 weeks. Is it going to be horrible if I don't get every single project on my spring cleaning list done? No. I mean, obviously the deadline is there. I would love to have my house feeling fresh, renewed, reorganized, decluttered before going into summer. If it doesn't all happen, who cares? You know, that one doesn't have too grand of an effect. I'm catching myself here because I do think it's going to have a great effect. I just mean that, like, in the grand scheme of everything that was on that piece of paper, things like, you know, reorganizing my bathroom cupboards, it's got a deadline, but it's not going to be make or break whether or not I do it. It's not going to like decide whether or not I can put food on the table for my family or pay my bills. And then the very last one, no exclamation mark, means that it doesn't have a deadline, and it's also not super important right now. And like, I would use the spring season as some way to clarify that. So it's not to say that it's not important, because there are things that I put no exclamations by that I do feel I want to have figured out at some point. It's just one of those things where it's like, yes, this is on my mind, but it doesn't necessarily need to be figured out by spring. So things like making the blanket out of my boys' clothes, like that is something that I keep telling myself I want to do. I keep telling myself I need to start, but it doesn't have a deadline, and it's also something I could easily do any other year. In fact, it would be smarter for me to do it next year, because even though I have all the supplies and I'm ready to go, and I've done Skillshare classes to literally learn how to do it, I can hold off on that until next year, and then I'll have all of their first year clothes done, because then my last will be over the 1 year mark. So that is something that doesn't get an exclamation mark at all. Now, lists are great. I love a good list, but systems are better. Like, think James Clear. I feel like everybody and their cat has read Atomic Habits. And if you haven't, definitely read it. That is one of those books that has sat with me. I think I've read it twice now, actually. And I always come back to some of the wisdom from that book. And the idea of creating systems is one of those things where, yes, a to-do list is great, but again, it's not really prioritized. And a lot of the times I am somebody where if my list is really long, and it's always really long, it's going to overwhelm me into a freeze state. But if I create a system, if I create an actionable plan, then it actually dwindles your list down, because there are things that get planted into different days or into routines by habit stacking. So it's going to take your discernment to know what system is going to make sense for which category. But personally, the way that I did it in my journal was I wrote down each category, and then within each category, I wrote down a goal. So for instance, my goal was to obviously my 2025 garden. That's a goal in and of itself. And beside each goal, I wrote a deadline or a timeline. I prefer timelines over deadlines because deadline just seems so daunting. Timeline feels more like, by this time, I would love to have this done. So obviously by May 31st, I would love to have my gardens planted, ready to go, ready to flourish into summer. And you can have multiple goals within a category, obviously. So that goal fit into my home and home projects, along with spring cleaning. Spring cleaning is a different goal. And then my spring cleaning timeline was 8 weeks. So you pick your goal, you pick your timeline, and then you break that goal down into steps. What does each step of completing that goal look like? My garden is higher priority than spring cleaning, so it went higher up on the list in that category. 2025 garden, May 31st. And then the first step is planning my garden. So deciding what I want to plant, where I want to plant it, and what it needs to be planted with. Step 2 is figuring out if there are anything I need to get supply-wise this year, or if I need to source new seeds, or if I need to source any kind of plants this year. Then step 3 would be planting seedlings in the house, which we're hopefully going to do in the next week or two. Just getting some of those seedlings started indoors, because I live in Ontario, so there's a lot of stuff you need to start early and inside, and then you need to step 4, harden them off as we move into May. April, a step before hardening off the seedlings would be to, once all of the snow melts, turn the soil in the garden beds, make sure that the greenhouse is cleaned out, everything is set and ready to go, take out all of the garden supplies. And then the last step is obviously planting everything into the actual garden beds in the format or in the plan that I had. So if I follow those steps all of the way into May, then I should have my garden planted for 2025 by May 31st. This is going to take the most amount of time in terms of planning your spring, especially if you do have a lot of things that you're trying to organize and figure out. I ended up with I think it was 8 different category goals. Not goals within each category, but just in general, out of my 5 categories, I had about 1 to 2 goals per category. You might have a deadline like May 31st for a garden, but for other things, I only had 1 goal under my personal health and daily schedule. And that's specifically because of the shift in daycare. I'm going to be with both of my sons more during the day now. I'm working at night now. I have seen over the last few weeks how draining that can be if I'm not super smart about it. So I knew or felt this impending stress, high priority stress, to figure out a new routine that was going to keep my cup full, keep my work flowing and my content creation flowing, but also keep me stress-free, or as stress-free as possible, and present as a mom. And that is not something that has a deadline. That is an ongoing routine. So the difference between that goal and the garden goal is that instead of writing out steps, I wrote out a new routine to follow. So having your goal and your timeline can be ongoing, then either break it down into a new routine or steps you need to take to fulfill that goal. And then do that for each category, whatever your goals are in each category. And the great thing about that is then you can, and this is the final step, take your routines or your steps and your deadlines and then transfer them into a calendar that best suits you. So if you like paper planners, like I have a paper planner, I went into the monthly paper planners or monthly spreadsheets and wrote down what my goals were and where. And then I went into the weekly and I punched out what steps need to be done which week and just wrote them out in the weekly to-do list. I didn't actually put them into what day they need to be done yet, because it's just more so overall this week, I need to make sure that I plan my garden. Overall the next week, I need to make sure that I write out whatever supplies or go source what supplies and seedlings that I need. Then week 3, I need to make sure that I am planting seeds inside the house. And I did that for each of my goals. So then I went back to my book goal and I wrote my goal deadline for my book. And then I went back each week and mapped out what steps I need to take each week in order to get that done. You could do this digitally, you could do this in a paper planner, but doing that is the part for me that gave me the most relief. Each week at some point, I just need to make sure this one step gets done. And if I do that and I fulfill those steps each week in each category, then all of my goals will complete themselves. Well, I'll complete them, but they will all get complete without me feeling overwhelmed or feeling like I need to 100% focus on one thing, complete it in full before moving on to the next thing. However, there is a final step, and this is the step that I'm working on, and it's worth including, and it's letting go of perfection and giving yourself some grace. Let's say now you have all of your goals and your timelines and you figured out what you need to do each week, and it's week 1 or it's week 3 or it's week 5 in spring, and something doesn't get done, something doesn't get tended to, something gets left behind. As much as it is great to structure things out, and I do truly believe that, like manifestation, bringing something from your mind into reality, bringing a goal from your wishes into your actual reality, half of it is believing you can do it, and half of it is following a strategy to actually get it done and showing up consistently. But if you have a lot going on, you can cut yourself a little slack. You can move things around if you need to as you go. And again, for me, I'm focusing on the top 3. The 3 exclamation mark things are the things that I focus on first in the week, and then move my way down that list of the other steps for things like, so if spring cleaning ends up being half done, then whatever, as long as my content gets done and as long as my taxes get filed, as long as I follow my routine, and that, the reason why that the new daily routine is a top 3 exclamation mark, me having a little bit of rest in the day is more important than me spring cleaning my closet, because me having a little bit of rest in the day and following that routine is what's going to keep my cup full to keep pouring and keep doing those things. So I might not get that closet cleaned this week, but maybe I'll end up cleaning it next week because I took a bit of rest. And that's why the priority part is key, at least for me, because otherwise I won't know. I literally won't know what is most important. And it's so easy, I find, to put myself and my health last. I'll just always put myself out to do the things that I intend to do, and then I end up burnt out and exhausted, and then everything else domino effect. If I do that, if I end up burnt out and exhausted because I'm trying to hold too much to structure and not give myself a little bit of grace, then all of the other weeks will domino effect fail. I might get a sprint done now and get a lot done in the very beginning, but then the rest of the season is just going to be me exhausted and trying to keep up with myself. So that's why having that little bit of fluidity and grace, having that ability to let go of perfection is so key. It's not about chasing perfection. It's just giving yourself a sense of control, to feel like you're in the driver's seat of your life again, and that you can trust yourself. You can trust yourself to know, okay, I've got this figured out. I've got a plan, and I'm going to know what is best in terms of taking action on that plan as I go about the days and the weeks. If you try to do this, if you do this brain dump, spring organize, mental declutter, and you find yourself feeling super overwhelmed or super scatterbrained, then pause and come back to it. I know this is what I did. So I disclaiming that because I don't want this to sound condescending, because it's literally what I had to do. At first it was overwhelming me too much. It took me all day yesterday to do this because I kept on having to do it in patches and in little doses because one, it was overwhelming me, and two, I'm taking care of a baby. But I had to stop and meditate and then come back to it. And I had to rework some wordings in some of the brain dump things because I felt myself getting a little bit too meticulous and a little bit too detailed on things. Okay, my memory card is officially low. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to end this here and put the rest of the spring stuff I had planned into the next chat. I hope you guys enjoyed this little planning session for spring. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're all feeling inspired by the upcoming season. And I will chat with all of you guys next week. Bye, everyone.